Hi everyone, here's an introduction to close reading. Close reading is a reading comprehension strategy that asks you to interpret a text's message by examining that text's rhetorical appeals and/or literary devices. Close reading requires you to look more carefully at a particular passage. It asks you to acknowledge what the text says while analyzing how the text delivers that information. Furthermore, and especially important for the purposes of our Introduction to Fiction class, close reading is the foundation of literary criticism as a tool and a field. Now, you might be thinking that that all sounds very unattainable and academic. However, here's an everyday example of close reading that I am certain we are all guilty of. Let's say, for instance, that you receive this text message on a Friday at 6:31 p.m. Hey, I can't go out tonight. Maybe next time. Red heart, sparkly emoji. Now, on the surface, that text might seem kind of unremarkable and innocuous. However, here's a close reading of that text message. For example, you might think, well, why did they punctuate hey with a period instead of an exclamation mark? They didn't explain why they can't make it. Do they have other plans or do they just not want to go? If they do have other plans, why didn't they just say that? Well, they said maybe next time, but they didn't suggest a specific time. However, they did end the message with an exclamation mark and an emoji, so maybe they do want to hang out later, and so on and so forth. We've all done this. We're all guilty of the cryptic close reading of a text message. Mapping those same principles and ideas onto a more literary example, here's an excerpt from F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby that is also prime for a close reading. But above the gray land and the spasms of bleak dust which drift endlessly over it, you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles, which pass over a non-existent nose. In order to conduct a close reading of this passage, let's take a closer look at the language that's being used in just these couple of sentences. So here I've highlighted some words that stood out to me, and there could be others as well that stand out to you, and those are just as valid. For example, words like gray, spasms, bleak, dust, gigantic, the size of the retinas. There's no face, but in lieu of the face, there are enormous yellow spectacles. The non-existent nose. All of these are ideas and images that seem significant to me. And if we look at these elements together, we can start to conduct close reading. We can start to draw conclusions from these details. Here's an example of a conclusion that you could derive from the details that we pulled from that passage. In this passage, Nick Carraway, who's the narrator here, describes how nature has eroded a billboard advertising the services of ophthalmologist Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. The dust has reduced the illustration of Dr. Eckelberg's face to a menacing pair of inhuman eyes, positioning the image as a monstrous figure looking over the Valley of Ashes. Because these eyes are omnipresent, the valley's residents feel as if they are always being watched. Furthermore, the sensation of being watched makes the valley's inhabitants, who are significantly poorer than the people who live in West Egg or East Egg, hyper-aware of their class status. Those who live in the Valley of Ashes feel simultaneously ostracized and observed by the wealthy neighborhoods that surround them. In this way, the passage demonstrates the novel's interest in class status and, more specifically, the fragility of the American dream. Now, that close reading is not going to win me a Pulitzer by any means. However, it is a successful close reading, and here's an explanation of why it works. That paragraph, even though it's quite brief, extrapolates meaning from specific textual details to make an argument about what the text is saying. We're teasing out details such as the erosion of the billboard and the position of the billboard itself in order to make a claim about what Fitzgerald is trying to convey through this passage. Additionally, that close reading is presented in elevated or scholarly language that is mechanically and grammatically correct. So it's accessible to my target audience on multiple levels, on the global level of purpose and on the local level of sentences. We're going to practice these close reading skills in our first project, the close reading essay. And you can find more information, such as the assignment sheet detailing the particulars of this assignment, as well as the rubric that I'll be using to assess this assignment on our Brightspace course site. I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to close reading, and please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Thanks. Until next time.